It's getting tight out west. Top seed, the Denver Nuggets look to bounce back against a team with the worst record in the West from last night, the Phoenix Suns. With that, let's welcome in Mike Singer from the Denver Post. Mike, the Nuggets have, for the most part of the season, been exceptional. However, they lost to the Suns last night without Devin Booker. How did the team react to that particular loss?
Nikola Jokic in particular was upset about it. He said that the team took the Suns way too lightly. He said he actually expected them to lose because they were so loose in the locker room, and he said we played their record. Like you said, Suns last place in the Western Conference. That is a loss that is unbecoming of a first-place team, especially without Devin Booker. But before we bash the Nuggets, let's just, put it into perspective. It's probably their worst loss of the year, but given that they only have 13 so far this year, I think you can live with it halfway through the season when they finally, lay an egg.
Mike Fratello here. Just wondering, this team went down to the final game of the season last year to have their hearts broken. Minnesota went in. They did not make it to the playoffs. What's the difference right now between this year's team and the one that finished up the season last year?
The first thing you have to point to is the defense. Last year, they were among the lower third in the NBA in terms of overall defensive efficiency. This year, they're 10th. The other thing you have to point to is just the organic development of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. Both of them are playing at borderline all-star levels. And then even though the Nuggets have dealt with more injuries than any other team in the NBA, a lot of the role players like Torrey Craig, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, Monte Morris have stepped up and filled these roles. And even Malone said today, no one would have expected that they would be in first place given all the injuries they've had. So it's just been a lot of organic development, guys sort of flourishing in these new roles.
I like that phrase, organic development. So it leads me right into the big man matchup tonight. They played together, one left, one got some new money, one got a little bit of money. How's that between Nurkic and the Joker now? Come on, all the big fellas going to go at one another tonight.
I think they're going to go at each other, but I can tell you, I think Nurkic, he relishes these matchups. He doesn't like how that went down. Obviously, 2 years ago, the Nuggets made their decision. They decided to make Nikola Jokic the offensive fulcrum of the team, ultimately traded Nurkic. We'll see if there's a little bit of bad blood between them, but I think Jokic is too much of a sweetheart. I don't think he really wants to get into Nurkic like that. But, it's interesting. Nurkic is rolling. Nikola is rolling. It's going to be a fascinating matchup down low.
I was looking at the box score, and I thought I saw a name that has been missing for the majority of the season. Has Will Barton returned?
Will Barton has returned. Will Barton returned last night in Phoenix. He'd missed the first 36 games. He had surgery to repair hip and core muscles after the second game of the season. And Michael Malone talked about the difficulties of reintegrating him back into the lineup after he's missed nearly half the season. And, once the Nuggets finally start to get whole, Paul Millsap returns. Gary Harris returns, only to go out again with a hamstring injury. So now they got Will Barton back, and it's just a juggling match. And whether, Michael Malone can navigate sort of figuring out these roles and how to include the reserve players versus getting them back in the starting lineup. That's going to be the next few weeks, whether they can sort of solve this minutes crisis.
Well, you're leading right into my next question, where now you have all this goodwill because when guys were injured, it gave the bench a chance to get better and understand what they need to do. Now everyone's healthy. Are they really understanding how good they really can be if they want to challenge in the West?
I've asked some of the guys this, and the reality is that they are in first place in the West, and yet they have been at about 60%, 65% of their potential, in my opinion.
Right.
They need the cohesion. They need Gary Harris back. They need Will Barton back. And then we'll see what they can do. And obviously Isaiah Thomas is still sitting there waiting in the wings, and no one really knows if he's going to be able to contribute or in any sort of timely fashion. So I think that there is a ton of potential, as you alluded to, and it's just a matter of whether they can finally realize that potential and get all these guys healthy again.
It's incredible, including drafting a guy like Michael Porter Jr., who was arguably one of the most talented players coming into this draft. Of course, he had the injury, so that's why we haven't seen him yet. Michael Singer, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Good stuff.
Well, look, the Warriors half game back of the Nuggets for that top spot out west, and you saw the slip up last night by Denver. 3D, when you have a team like Golden State in the midst of what we can call a dynasty right now, on your heels, right there. Does that add pressure to a team like Denver as you're trying to hold that top spot out west?
Believe it or not, Chris, I don't think it's any pressure because they don't know no better yet. And that's why he answered that last question so perfectly. When you had Millsap and Will Barton and Gary had you've had pretty much half of your starters out all season long, and you're still the top of the West. So all season long, I've been scratching my head, Coach, like, how is Mike Malone keeping this? How is he doing this? Is the Joker really this good? Why is his name not mentioned in the MVP? And we mentioned all these other guys, and they're the top of the West. Is the West really that good, Coach? How come we're not giving the Joker more credit? So now you're getting all these guys back. The All-Star break is coming. To your point, yes, the Warriors are getting healthy too, but you're still the top of the West, and you haven't been 100% all season long.
I don't want to minimize the importance of Will Barton to this team.
No question.
Will Barton can be a starter. Will Barton is great, sixth man coming off the bench. This guy puts up numbers. He's versatile. He plays more than one position for them. He hasn't been around. They're just getting him back now. When he rounds back into shape, Millsap rounds back into shape. Watch out for Denver.
Yeah.
I mean, when you mentioned Will Barton, played the first 2 games this season, got injured, came back last night. Like you said, he's a guy that they thought, okay, this is going to be a major part of our team, has not been there. I mean, these guys really, look, you mentioned the Joker as part of the MVP conversation. We actually had that conversation about a month ago. And since then, he's scored more in big games because back then it was, oh, the Joker's not scoring enough when they need him to score. He's shown that he can do that as well, Czar. I mean, if that's the case, should he be considered more in that MVP conversation?
I think when people take Denver for real, then you may start to hear his name more. Right now, I think people have said, well, we're just waiting for Golden State to get it together. What happened to Houston at the beginning of the season? They're starting to get it together. So let's see now. The challenge of these teams that we thought were going to be really good are now starting to hit stride, and they are really good at this point in the season. Can Denver hold on? Because they'll meet each other, they'll face each other during the second half of the season. We'll see if they're ready to take on the challenge.
3D, try not to get too excited. We know Steph Curry's back healthy, and he's one of the greatest shooters of all time. And you discussed who are some of the greatest shooters in the league right now, and who do you want taking the last shot in the game? We bring you that next on Game Time Live. Well, the Cleveland Cavaliers are struggling, and injuries have been a big part of that. Kevin Love, of course, at the top of that list. Larry Nance Jr., the most recent addition to that list. Former Laker out the next 2 to 4 weeks and will not play against his old team. Let's welcome in Fred McLeod, play-by-play voice for the Cavs. Fred, back in November when LeBron returned to Cleveland, there was a certain energy to that game. Cavs kept that one close, losing by just 4. With LeBron out and this game being played in L.A., how different are you expecting the atmosphere to be tonight?
You know, it's always fun, Chris, when you come to L.A., even in the prior years that they've struggled with the 4 seasons, of course, going to the lottery. There's still a buzz here. You still have the famous faces, but obviously when you 23 is not on the floor and against his old team, it loses a little bit of luster, but still we expect a heck of a ball game. Both teams can score the ball, so, we on the Cavs side of things miss seeing LeBron on the floor because he's a once-in-a-generational talent, and we know what he meant to the city of Cleveland, and, at least I'll get to say hi to him anyway.
And Fred, with that being said, how hard has it been for the young guys to hear of all the great things you witnessed the last 4 with LeBron and now saying he's not there? How hard has it been for those guys to go through this?
Not at all. I think, first of all, Dennis, I think we're in a much better place than we were in 2010 without question. A younger core, assets in place, so they know it's a learning curve. Listen, they've all grown up, watching LeBron dominate the league as much as he has, and so now they have to carve their own path, and the organization's really excited. Got an owner that knows to preach patience right now to let this thing unfold and build it bit by bit. And as you know, look at the Denver Nuggets. They went through a 5-year drought, and now they're going to be back into the playoffs. And the Lakers themselves, every team goes through it. So the Cavs, it's our turn, so to speak, to build a new chapter and build a new future. And with guys like Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance Jr. and Jetty Osman, there's some formative pieces here. Now you just have to be you can't make mistakes on draft night, and Kobe Altman and his front office certainly know that and are fully getting ready for this upcoming draft.
Guys, I've been fortunate enough to do a couple of the Cavs second halves with Fred and Austin Carr. And Fred, it seems like this young group can find enough energy for about 24 minutes, but then come that third quarter, there's a major plunge as far as them not being able to sustain it and continue the energy they gave for the first 24 minutes. It's getting to be a frustrating situation for the team, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, Mike, not only is it youthful learning, but it's attrition. You showed that graphic. Losing 3 bigs off the top right now and your best perimeter defender. So go right down the list. Let's say Indiana, you take out Sabonis. And I'm not making excuses, but it's reality. Take out Sabonis, take out Turner, take out Thad Young, take out their best perimeter defender. Go to Boston, take out Baines, take out Horford, Marcus Morris, Marcus Smart. And things are a little bit different. You still have great players out there with Kyrie Irving and Victor Oladipo, but it's just attrition, Mike, and it's been so difficult. And recently we've missed Rodney Hood for 7 games and Tristan Thompson prior to that for 10. So Larry Drew has said he's never, in his 38 years of playing or coaching in the NBA, ever seen such a destruction of a roster with key injuries. And so you just got to bide your time until they get back on the floor.
Well, the season didn't start out the way the Cavs had hoped they did. So as a result, we've seen certain players moved on now. Korver's gone, George Hill's gone, JR is not with the team. But some guys have stepped up. Clarkson has increased his value, in my opinion.
Yes.
Then a guy like Thompson comes back, and if Thompson is a piece you need for your team, or Kevin Love, who has a very nice contract, 3 years left after this year on his contract, and even a guy like Hood, there's trade value there. Would you expect the Cavs to make another move before trade deadline?
In terms of actually helping this season, you think? Is that what you're asking?
Or getting who knows, you get another first-round pick down the road. Isn't that part of what it's all about?
Yeah, exactly. I think they'll survey any possible scenario to see, what's going to help not only short-term but long-term. Losing Kevin was such a difficult loss, not only a 5-time All-Star, but part of the maturation of having Colin Sexton grow is to having guys like Kevin in the very first bucket of the season. He caught a pass and set up another player for a dunk. And, Colin doesn't have that option right now, a go-to guy in the block, as you're seeing, or a guy that can flash to the corner. And so Colin's had to carry a lot of that scoring load on his own, but he's a really willing worker, a sponge. He attacks the rack, as we know, with great speed. But he's seeing things more now, and he says he's really tough on himself, but he expects to be able to continue to mature. He's leaning on Matthew Dellavedova, leaning on Larry Drew, who played the point guard position for 10 years. So I love the dog in him, so to speak, and 3D, you can speak to that. That's a compliment to a guy who's got a great motor and wants to improve. He wants to be great, and so time will tell.
Cavs-Lakers play tonight at 9:30. Fred McLeod, play-by-play voice for the Cavaliers. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, Chris. Thanks, fellas.
All right, Freddie.
Thank you, Fred.
Let's continue that conversation in particular about a guy like Kevin Love. He's been hurt for a big part of the season, so we're not hearing his name. But when you look at where Cleveland is, worst record in the NBA, you look at a guy, Kevin Love, who can clearly contribute on a team that's trying to contend. Do you imagine that he'll still be on this roster past the trade deadline as teams are looking to improve to make a playoff push?
Things happen that you can't predict. Okay, so at the time that Cleveland signed Kevin to a 4-year contract this past summer, everyone was like, wow, they made the commitment to Kevin Love, and they wanted Kevin there, and they wanted to be in the playoffs this year. But then after 4 games, Kevin is out, and then the series of injuries that we've just talked about pile up. They finally make that decision, you know what, this isn't going the way we thought it was going to go. We can get some value, so Korver's moved on. George Hill has moved on. The reasons for JR not being with the team right now, other teams are sitting out there. They want JR.
Right.
They're just waiting for the Cavs to cut him so they can pick him up rather than have to do a deal and give up a second-round pick or whatever it might be. So this team now has changed direction, and they are in the rebuild mode. Kevin is a huge piece. His contract is not that bad. 3 more years, and if you trade for him, you've got him for 3 more years after this year. So it's not like you get him, you're worried he's going to walk away on you like a Kawhi Leonard situation. So I think something else will happen before trade deadline. If it's Kevin, you know what, 5-time All-Star, he deserves to play with a good team.
And certainly the Cleveland Cavaliers looking to stock up on draft picks. It'll be interesting to see if Love is moved for one of those. Good game coming on tonight. The Nuggets and the Blazers. That is correct. Jokic getting his dance on. We're going to check in on the Joker next. You're watching Game Time Live.
Get it, big fella. Get it. Dab on him, dab on him, dab on him, dab on him.